Hi, and welcome to Atomic Consultancy's Boom podcast. Had to call it Boom, of course. I am delighted to start this podcast series, and it would only be appropriate for me to have my first guest on this morning, my last ever boss, the legend, the king of acquisitions. It's Will Linley. I'm so excited. Hi Will, thank you so much for coming on to our first ever podcast.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure.
And it's the first time you've ever done one.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel very, very privileged.
Yeah,
So
privilege.
You were my last ever boss.
Yeah.
How was I to?
Well, it wasn't without incident, was it? It was a good 2 years. Or?
It was just over a year.
Yeah. No, well, it was fun, and it was great to work with you, albeit briefly.
Yeah. No, we had a great time. I think when I was the very first employee of the Lomond when you did the merger.
You were, yeah. We definitely hit the ground running, didn't we? I think
we did.
In your time with us, how many deals did we?
I think we did 19.
19.
Yeah. It was quick. It was fast.
Yeah.
But we had a great time.
Yeah.
It was. No, I loved it. It was brilliant and learnt a huge amount, I think. But let's talk about kind of how you got to merge with Lomond and Nick and Linley Simpson as a brand, because I say it jokingly that you are the king of acquisitions, but really Linley Simpson grew predominantly through lettings, through acquisitions, and you genuinely, and I mean this, the way in which you grew and how professional you were, you always commercially did the right deal, you didn't try and undercut people, but how did you kind of, with you and Nick, how did all of that start, and how did Linley and Simpson kind of?
Sure. So way back, Nick and I worked together for about 5 years at what was ultimately William H. Brown.
Okay.
So at that point it was owned by Royal & Son Alliance. We both worked in lettings. By that point I started out in lettings and working in the sector for about 10 years. I decided I wanted to go and set up on my own. I asked Nick if he wanted to come with me, and thankfully he did. So we started Linley Simpson in 1997. We had a couple of branches in the suburbs of Leeds.
Okay.
And I think we were a little bit ahead of the curve at the time because we were a high street dedicated letting agent. We didn't do sales, didn't actually start doing sales for 16 years.
Really?
No, it was pure lettings. And I think in hindsight, timing was great for us because it was just the sort of cusp of the buy-to-let wave. So we were fortunate in that respect. The amount of activity from small-scale buy-to-let investors was significant. There wasn't the competition in the letting sector that there is today, so we were able to grow the business organically very quickly. And we were about 5 years in. We'd started to get ideas that we wanted to grow across the Yorkshire region and expand the business, and we got offered an opportunity to buy a letting agency in Harrogate. So 2002, Adams Lettings, I think it was, that was our first deal. And we kind of twigged probably ahead of the curve a bit there, that growing our business, the best way to grow our business was going to be through acquisitions. So from that point on, we sort of self-funded a deal a year sort of thing.
So you self-funded that through the cash that you'd got, okay.
Yeah, I think we took a modest amount of bank debt, but we grew through acquisitions year on year at a nice steady pace. Every year we were bigger than the prior year. And that was kind of how we went for up until 2018, when we decided to really supercharge the business by getting private equity involved.
And when you did those acquisitions back in 2002, by the way, I was 16 then, I'd just finished my GCSEs, but was there still the same multipliers? Was it lower? Was there still deferred consideration? Has it changed since?
Yeah, interesting question. I think we pretty much stuck to more or less the same principles of value. I can't remember well enough. There wasn't as much activity around M&A, so there weren't kind of price multiples that were as set in stone as they might be today. Yeah, it's a long time ago. I can't remember whether we were paying more or less then. I suspect less.
Yeah.
They deferred. We always tried to stick to the same principle, and what worked kind of evolved over the first few years, but then we kind of developed our own sort of deal structure that worked for us, that we thought was fair for the sellers. And for me, a big part of doing any deal was ensuring that what we proposed was fair to the sellers.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how we grew, and we gradually expanded into what we felt were all the better demographics of Yorkshire, and continuing to grow organically along the way.
I think you grew via acquisition as well, by not via brokers as well. You did buy through brokers, but a lot of your acquisitions were relationship led, that you had known for a long time, and you made the effort to go and speak with them regularly, take them for a coffee. And I think a lot of the feedback I had when we were doing is in Yorkshire, even now we don't get much in Yorkshire, because everybody would go to Will because they knew that you were paying the correct value, you were commercially transparent, when you looked them in the eye and you shook the hand, unless there was something major through due diligence. And actually, because of that, I think that's why I do think, that you were really the king of acquisitions in Yorkshire, because people, you weren't funny trying to be clever and underhand someone or undercut the deferred. The industry is really small in effect, and people will find out about that. And I think that for me, with how you grew via acquisition, that way you didn't rely just on brokers, you actually did make that effort.
Yeah, there was virtually no broker involvement in the early days. I can't remember the first deal we did that was introduced through a broker.
Right.
Haversley Group, remember? I mean, way back, they were probably the most active. But no, I mean, it was a long courtship in many cases. You'd be constantly contacting, whether it was phone calls, letters, whatever. The agents you wanted to target, and sometimes it was a slow burn. I remember buying a business that a lady rang me out of the blue one day and she said, "I've had your letter next to my bed for 5 years, and I've decided it's the right time now."
Wow.
So what it was doing next to her bed, I don't know, but that just indicates how long it can take to get a business owner to the point that they feel it's the right time to sell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when you were growing via acquisition, obviously, how did you have a team that integrated the businesses when you got to a certain level? Because I think a lot of the buyers that we work with, especially independent agents, that integration piece, sometimes they focus on the systems but forget about the staff and the communication and things. And I think, again, I learnt a lot through being at Lomond and working with you. Your team at Linley Simpson were excellent on the integration side, and obviously coming from a corporate integration background at LSL, I found your approach was much more around communication and around looking after the people, and seeing the deferred considerations being paid out every single time was a testament, I think, to the way in which you integrated businesses.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think in many ways at Linley and Simpson, once we'd got to a certain scale, we sort of had the best of both worlds. We had the benefits of scale, but we didn't have the sort of constraints that large corporates have.
Yeah.
We'd got to a point where we'd established a remote head office with a head office team, sort of operational team, with a vast amount of experience. So they were well tuned in terms of what we needed to do in the integration process. Everyone had their own part to play in that. So, I think it was very clear. I think we did a good job of bringing those businesses on board.
Yeah.
Client retention was always high. I think in many cases we bought businesses where the service after was improved, so there wasn't a lot of reason for landlords not to want to stay with us.
Yeah, and you've had people that, we were just talking about one of the staff members that's still at Lomond, has been there 28 years. You had a real core team that really started with you, right from you and Nick, right from the start, didn't you? And
so Nick and I left, and 2 members of staff came with us from William H. Brown. Those 2 are still there now,
wow.
28 years later. So, yeah, I mean, I was always immensely proud of the team that we had and the loyalty that they showed to Nick and I.
Yeah. I think that's something that, I mean, we're only 4, but I think that culture, people stay, they'll only stay if it's a nice place to work as well. And again, growing via acquisition, some of the things that can be difficult for your team is there's a lettings manager in that branch, and then there's a lettings manager in the business that you're buying. And if you don't, reassure your current lettings manager that, this is a growth opportunity and we're going to create the gold standard, then you do lose. So, making sure that your team as well as the incoming team, that it's quite a challenging dynamic sometimes, especially if you're growing at the rate that you were.
And well, I suppose staff reactions were on an acquisition were often hard to predict, and quite often they'd sort of react in unison, so that either all embrace it as a great thing and an opportunity, or they'll all decide they don't want to go there, and you'd lose more than you think. But it was always a balance. I mean, every acquisition opportunity, the basis of making that work for us was on some staff savings. So to some extent it wasn't always a problem if you lost a few, but it was making sure you didn't lose the people you wanted to keep in the deal.
Yeah.
The key people that really made a difference. So
yeah.
There's always a balance.
So what size of how big was the portfolio before you merged with Lomond, and why did you then look to, was it so that you could grow quicker and you needed that funding? Where did it get to that conversation?
No, the tipping point was the first private equity deal, not the Lomond merger.
Right, okay.
So, and what actually started all that, bizarrely, was 2016 when the tenant fee ban was announced.
Okay.
And we were all sort of concerned about what the impact of that was going to be. At that point in time, it was about 10% of our income at Linley Simpson, but it was still, it was a large contribution. And so Nick and I started wondering what was best for the business, and conversations with our accountant at the time, he suggested that we had a conversation with a couple of private equity operators, which we did. They were both keen to invest. The idea there was that effectively the business is valued and gives us an opportunity to take some of that value off the table at that point. So the deal we did with ultimately with Lloyds Development Capital, LDC, we took a third of the value at that point. So
okay.
For Nick and I, with a worry about the tenant fee ban and the impact of that, we got some cash off the table, as you'd say. But the really sort of defining element that came out of that process was to get private equity investment in your business, which is no mean feat.
And a lot of people ask us about how to do this, so I think this is quite interesting how you managed to achieve that, because it is not easy.
No, and you've got to be able to demonstrate a past track record and a potential of significant accelerated growth, and ultimately it's got to be a business that's saleable at a significantly higher value.
So how many properties did you have under management then, roughly, when you went for the first private equity?
God. I think we were about 5,000.
Okay. So
Linley and Simpson was,
yeah.
and Linley and Simpson were 16,000 when I left.
Okay.
And I can't remember well enough to see what the numbers were.
No, but what I'm saying is actually Linley and Simpson as a business without equity funding, you were above 3,000, 4,000 units. So you were
5 was a number that I'm pretty certain we were at least 5,000.
So that's still a significant size business, because we do see some potential buyers that are looking at an exit strategy of 10 to 15 years saying I want to look at private equity, but their portfolio at the moment is 300 properties. You've got to be at a certain point in your business journey and have a certain amount of, you need to be showing, like you say, the accelerated growth that you've got, but you've got to demonstrate that past track record, which is what you've been able to do.
Yeah, I think one of the sort of change points in my journey was I think it was about 10 years in, I effectively stopped being a letting agent and became a business manager, and I came back from the coalface of the business and literally just ran the business and ran the strategy for growth. And the difficulty for a lot of agents is they're still operating at the sharp end, trying to run their business, trying to doing valuations, whether it's sales or lettings or whatever. But unless you're able to step back from that and really work on the business rather than in it, it'll be difficult to achieve that level of growth. So yeah, we went when we did the deal, and in the world of private equity, everything's measured around EBITDA. We were 1.5 million EBITDA. A part of that process, you've got to sort of formulate a 3-year business plan, and that business plan, which took a lot of work, but essentially the plan took us from 1.5 to 5 million EBITDA in 3 years. And it was
significantly a lot in 3 years.
Yeah, and it's dependent on M&A activity and acquiring so many businesses. But the one thing that came out of it above anything else was that having gone through that process, which was torturous in many ways, but it crystallises your mission, if you like.
Yeah.
You come away from it thinking, right, that's it now. We've signed up to this. We've got investors on board. We've now got to deliver this business plan. And actually, we did it in 2 years. So we really flew for that period, and in the eyes of LDC, our private equity investors, it was a great success. And that gave them the confidence then when the opportunity to merge with Lomond Capital came along, that gave them the confidence to think, right, okay, we'll see what Linley Simpson have done with Yorkshire. Lomond would give us an opportunity to do this nationally.
Oh, okay, so it wasn't LDC, you were already with LDC, and it was LDC in effect that merged.
LDC were shareholders in Linley Simpson, and LDC were approached with an opportunity to acquire Lomond Capital.
Right, okay.
So Lomond Capital had been running for 10 years at that point. They were private equity backed. They'd acquired businesses in Edinburgh, Aberdeen, Manchester, Birmingham, and Brighton.
Brighton, random place. All the other offices, and then Brighton.
It
works now with their London, but
they've done tons of research, and they wanted to buy a main player in a major city where there was scope for growth through acquisition.
Yeah.
So the strategy was right, but they had to do a transaction. Their existing investor wanted to exit. So that's how the opportunity came about, and we came together as two businesses. Lomond Group became the group name, and that's when my role changed to purely focus on M&A across all of the regions.
Yeah, and then there was a hell of a lot. It then escalated quite quickly then. But it was a big shift for you because you'd always been Linley and Simpson acquisitions in Yorkshire, and then all of a sudden we're doing, well, say we then, because this is when we joined, is we're doing acquisitions in Scotland, Manchester, Birmingham, Brighton, and obviously in Yorkshire as well. We had the acquisition team that had come from Lomond, so there was all the acquisitions team. We were all dotted around the country, weren't we, as well? And we'd all try and come together at least once a week. Yeah. But it was acquisitions in Scotland. We called it disco, different in Scotland, because there's different laws and all sorts of things. And actually, acquisitions in different parts of the country are managed differently, and everything can be quite challenging. And for you, you'd then moved and you weren't operationally at all involved at Linley and Simpson then. It was all...
No, so up to the point of the Lomond merger, I was the CEO of Linley and Simpson, so I then transitioned to head of acquisitions for Lomond Group. Nick Simpson became the CEO of Linley and Simpson. Martin Elliott was the CFO for the wider group then. So yeah, I mean, we all had to step up a level.
Yeah,
it's a big operation, but we completed 65 acquisitions in 4 years, and took the business from where the merged entity was around 10 million EBITDA, and it was about 45 million EBITDA when we left after 4 years.
I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah, and businesses of all kinds and all scales, but ultimately some great businesses we managed to come across, and then the business started to expand into new regions, as you know, with the likes of Mars and Bar in Kent, and Beals down on the south coast in Southampton.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting journey.
Yeah, I think for me, the time that I was at Lomond, it was really interesting because obviously I'd only ever worked at corporates, and 10 years ago, the large buyers nationally, it was Connells and LSL, and equity funding really, Lomond has really changed, I think, our market, because now there are other equity funders, and people are start to look at our sector and gone, this is quite actually an interesting. And so it's helped to drive value. Now LRG leaders, Lomond Group now are equity funded. There's Ameria. There's others that have now come into the market. But actually seeing Lomond grow at the rate that they did and being part of that, it was a really interesting time, because then they grew quickly. Then there needed to be various different heads of departments, and people had to take ownership of that, and we were very kind of fluid with our acquisitions, but the quicker we grew, there had to be that structure and that kind of process in place. So obviously then you get it to the 45 million EBITDA. I mean, that's just insane. And then obviously because equity funding really only want to stay in for 3 to 5 years, don't they? That's their kind of strategy.
Yeah. I mean, they all have slightly different sort of deal aspirations, but that's a typical PE house will have a fund that's got a 5-year lifespan, and in that time they'll buy businesses and sell them and look to exit.
Yeah. And there must have been a lot of interest.
Yeah,
when
Lomond went to market.
Yeah.
There was. I'll be honest, because it was always my intention to leave. I wasn't involved at the sharp end of the deal. So Stuart Pender was the group CEO, and he led the dialogue with buyers. I think initially there were 30 potential buyers wanting to discuss. I mean, all from the private equity space, and that whittled down through a bidding process. But ultimately the deal got over the line on the 12th of December. One day ahead of my 60th birthday, so I left on the 13th.
That's just what a journey though to actually finish and complete on your 60th, and the achievement that you've made. I mean, you look from how you started with Nick, and then you grew via acquisition to get to a certain point. You then got your own equity funding. You went from the 5,000 units of 1.5 million EBITDA to the 5 million in 2 years, and then you grew it from 5 million to then get to Lomond at 45 million. I mean, that is do you sometimes sit back and realise what an achievement that is, Will? Because and I'm not just blowing smoke up your arse here. That is amazing. Like, it is incredible. There's not many people, and I know you're very humble and you're not really front facing and in front of the camera, but genuinely as an industry you've really changed, I think, a lot of perceptions around acquisitions, and also just being a nice person, being hardworking and being genuine. And I mean that, Will, I do. But it's a phenomenal career that you've had, and I think you literally dropped the mic on the 12th of December and you walked out, and I was incredibly humbled, and I'm really glad now that we're friends, and I ring you quite a lot for advice still, and the journey that you've had, I think is amazing.
I guess it's quite unique in our sector, and it has been great in many ways.
Yeah.
It felt at the right time though. 40 years in the sector, and I've got the luxury now of being able to have choice in what I do going forward. But it's there's challenges growing a business at the rate we did, and I've often thought, even when we were growing Linley Simpson, the easiest business to run would be one that never gets any bigger or smaller. You just know what you're dealing with every day, and the biggest challenge in growing a business is realising how you need to change along the way. And a lot of businesses don't do that. They don't want to invest in whether it's an HR manager or a marketing manager or whatever they need to do to take their business to the next step.
It is hard, even for me, as a small business owner at this point. I set out from my bedroom, it was just going to be me. I wanted to just do 12 acquisitions, and I'm a control freak, and giving up parts of the company that you've worked really hard for and you're proud of what you've achieved, it's really difficult to,
It's got to be in your nature, hasn't it? And going back to, I said, 10 years into Linley Simpson, I stepped back as a letting agent and effectively worked on the business, but I was only able to do that by putting what I believe were good managers into each office and entrusting that manager to do a good job and not micromanaging them. And giving staff the right level of autonomy in where they operate, I think gets the best out of them. And that, I think, is a problem with a lot of the larger corporates, is you start to micromanage and then staff feel undermined. So we were only able to do that because I was happy to let go, and that's where a lot of business owners find it hard.
Yeah. No, working for you, I remember, I'd come into the office and you weren't telling me what to do. It was, what do we think together as a team? And I'd be asking you more for advice rather than direction. It was, I got that, I had that trust in you that you were going to pull me up if there was something that we didn't agree with, or there was something that needed to be done, but you gave me the autonomy to just go out and and also allow me to be myself. I think I've said that before. When I was at LSL, we weren't even allowed to post on LinkedIn. We weren't allowed to and again, I appreciate it's big corporate, but actually once I started at Lomond, that was when actually people really started to get the real personality of Lucy with a thumbs up and started to do all of those things. But actually that did generate potential business, and that's how Atomic, I think, has also grown, is they see the real people behind the brand, and we're all approachable, and I think it is important to allow you, even if you think doing that's probably a bit off wall, it'll work for some and not for others. So coming back to something a bit light-hearted, I'm going to ask you, can you remember an exciting or completely you would never have expected something to have happened in an acquisition? Now I'll go first.
Go on then.
Now I remember when we were doing quite a large acquisition, and there was a breach of an NDA, and this particular seller was very frustrated about it, and went and got a helicopter from the location he was to where we were in Yorkshire.
Yes, I remember.
And it transpired that it wasn't us that had broke the NDA.
It was his daughter.
It was his daughter that was in the back of a taxi.
Yes,
And unfortunately, the taxi driver was a maintenance contractor or something for the day. And I think this is one of the things that I genuinely love acquisitions. It's just, I found my niche. I just love it. I think one of the things I love about it is every acquisition is different. I could literally write a book of some of the hilarious, stressful. There's so many things that goes right with acquisitions, but also I think people need to be prepared that every acquisition is not perfect. No business is perfect.
Stuff comes out the woodwork.
And there comes So any memories that stick out for you?
One story that comes to mind, which was a business that I've been talking to the owner for a little while about potentially selling. I went to meet with her at her office on the Thursday, and she was telling me that business was a struggle, it wasn't going very well, she was struggling to run it. And we, as good as, shook hands on a deal. And the next morning I was flying out Jet 2 to Portugal and got on the plane, and we took off, and out came the drinks trolley, and this lady, business owner, was pushing the trolley.
No, she wasn't.
She was working for Jet 2 while she was running her letting agent. So thankfully I'd bought a newspaper actually when I got on the plane, so I put the paper up.
Because you didn't want her to know.
I was on the back row and I just put the paper up, and she didn't spot me, but she clearly was struggling with the business. But,
did you buy it?
We did the deal, and she was very happy. So.
Is she still cabin crew now, do you know?
I've not seen her since.
No.
She'll probably be too old for it now. It was quite a while ago.
Amazing. So obviously you've gone through the whole process, you've bought so many businesses, and also now have exited yourself. So for any business owners that are looking to exit in the next 3 to 5 years, is there any advice, one particular piece of advice that you could part your knowledge?
Okay. I think, bear in mind, pretty much all business owners aren't familiar with selling a business. Selling it will be probably the one and only time they sell it, so it's sometimes a bit misguided of buyers to expect the seller to know what the process might be like. So I think brace themselves for what can be quite an intensive process, particularly if you've got some of the big consolidators, Lomond, LRG, as your buyer. There'll be a lot of due diligence to go through, and in preparation for that, make sure you've got your business as good a order as you can, and be ready to really focus on the due diligence inquiries that will come thick and fast.
Yeah.
I think, I always used to try and tell a seller, be ready for that and be prepared for it. It can be quite intense.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
Yes, or
to support you. But no, it is. I think sometimes it astounds me sometimes that sellers will go direct sometimes to a buyer and not test the market. But also when they do go direct, they sometimes don't then have that support. And there can be a lot of challenges throughout that process. And if it is a big engine, a buyer, then the human element of the business can be lost sometimes. And that's why I think I'm so passionate about acquisitions in this sector particularly, because we're not selling stationary shops and things. We're actually in effect buying people. We're buying staff and landlords, and that human element I think is really important.
Yeah, as a buyer, I would not necessarily always say you must use a broker, because as a buyer, if you can get an exclusive discussion with the seller, you're likely to get a better deal, potentially. Yeah. But as advice to a seller would be, yes, always use a broker, because they've done it before. They know what the process is like. If there's any sticking points to negotiate, the broker would step in and know what should be a sensible outcome. And I suppose another bit of advice would be, make sure you employ a lawyer that knows what they're doing.
Oh God, yeah.
Because so many that sellers have just gone to a solicitor they know that's done other stuff for them, yet they'll be really not qualified to deal with that.
We had a solicitor the other month that was acting for a buyer, and he emailed us and says, can you just tell me what client money is in relation to lettings? I was like,
well, there you go.
Your biggest exposure, basically. But obviously, it's not our job because we were acting for the seller, but you're looking at this buyer and just thinking you might be paying £10,000 to this solicitor to get this deal through, but he clearly is not going to protect you. That purchase agreement is not going to be strong. And you sign up to a lot of those things. So yeah, definitely use a good solicitor. Yeah. So lastly, where are we? December, what's life like for Will now?
Well, I'm taking aversion to the word retirement, because a lot of people say, how's retirement? And I really don't want to be retired. But no, I'm up to all sorts. So one of the things that I really enjoyed and was very proud of at Linley Simpson was we had a big alignment with a local children's hospice, Martin House. We've been supporting them for 15 years. I've recently become a trustee of the hospice, and I'm spending more of my time supporting them. I've got a share in a property development company, which spend a bit of time with that, which is going pretty well. And I'm just in the process of launching a paddle business.
Of course you are.
Yeah. Ironically, one of the last businesses that we bought at Lomond, I knew the owner, I'd known him for 15 years, and we've kept in touch, and we've been discussing new business opportunities. And I'm working with him. He's effectively doing all the heavy lifting, but we've just secured our first site, going in for planning for 9 paddle courts, and ultimately would like to build up a chain of paddle centres.
It just seems to have gone wild, this
paddle. It's absolutely booming, yeah. The new sort of level of uptake is phenomenal.
And did you get into paddle because your son plays at a very high level, tennis? Is that how?
No, he frowns at the whole thing.
Oh,
It's,
really?
paddle's for losers in his eyes.
Oh.
But no, I've been playing with some mates for about 4 years. Happened to have a small club in Harrogate that I play at, and got really into it. But I've got to remind myself I'm doing it as a business opportunity, not just
to play
indulge
paddle.
my
But if you can
pleasure.
do both, business and pleasure,
Well,
great.
absolutely. And to be honest, I'm really enjoying the prospect of starting a business that's completely different.
Yeah.
There's
not a lot of legislation in paddle, is there?
No.
It's a lot easier, no client money.
Yeah.
No.
It should be famous last words, touch wood.
Yeah.
Hopefully quite straightforward, but that's quite exciting. And then, other than that, I mean, my big passion is classic cars, as you know, and I race classic cars, and since retiring, I've been doing really well. I've had a great season so far with a couple of wins, so that's keeping me going.
It looks like, I mean, just that you're living your best life.
Well, good.
And you should, and you deserve it. And genuinely, I'm glad that not only you employed me all those years ago, because I don't think Atomic would be here if it wasn't, but I really appreciate your friendship. And I know that this is slightly out of your comfort zone doing these podcasts, but it means a lot to us as a company, and you're a legend. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you.